invited me over to his house. The kids were going swimming. They just got a brand new pool, and he was setting it up. Oh, sorry, I got an itch. Hang on a second. I'm not sure what kind of noise that's gonna make hitting the microphone like that, so I'll just kind of blot that out. So I started using this camera to take pictures of them, and I quickly discovered that camera won't work for that situation. I need to be able to change the zoom, as the kids move around. So I immediately realized I needed a new camera. So about this point in time, I had my bike, and I was going out on night bike rides. Now, I started going out at night when I was a teenager. At some point in time, I felt safer going out at night because I was afraid of people at that time. And I used to go out into the woods where Tigger and I used to go. And I'd spend the night out there just listening to the wildlife and just walking around. I loved it. I fell in love with it. The nightlife is so much different than in the daytime. Different types of animals out, different noises, louder noises. The crickets are really loud at night. The frogs are really loud at night. And I just loved it. That's when that started. So when I was living in the trailer, I was working nights at the time. So on my days off, I'd go for bike rides at night. And same thing as before, I always preferred going out on rainy nights, stormy nights, because there's less likely anyone's going to be around, right? Not going to meet up with anybody, because you meet up with someone at night, chances are they're not going to be a nice person. So I started going for bike rides again, and I started riding out to Allen Park Conservation Area at that time, ride the trails at night. I loved it. Or I'd hide my bike somewhere and I'd walk. I loved it, absolutely loved it. So I had my big Parisian wagon at that time when I just bored driving around, whatever. I discovered that place by mistake. So I started going out there on a bike. Sometimes I'd go out in the daytime. Most of the time it was at night. And I got to know the place very well. And I loved it. Anytime I wasn't working, I would be out there. If it was in the daytime, whatever, I'd drive out there. And a lot of times after work, I got off work at 7 o'clock in the morning, I'd go out there and go for a walk before I went home. Especially if it was raining. If it was a rainy morning, I'd be out there walking. I just loved it. So, did I mention I loved it? I think you get the point, right? So, I was out one night, and I didn't go out there. I was just biking around. And I got down by the river between Walkerton and Hanover on the back roads. And I decided to go for a swim. Normally, I'm prepared for that. And I'll have something with me to swim in or whatever. Or if I go out in the late evening and plan to come home later during the night or something, I'll wear shorts when I leave, but I'll bring pants with me to put on over top, or I'll bring a jacket, a sweater, whatever I'm doing, right? And a lot of times I know I'm going to go for a swim in the river or something, so I'll take my water shoes with me. Or if I'm riding in the rain, I wear my water shoes, right? It's really hard to bike with them, but, a lot of times, that's what I would do. Well, I went out this night. I had no plan to do that. I was just out for a bike ride. I had no plans on going anywhere or doing anything. I got down by the river, and it was a really warm night, and I just felt like going for a swim. So I wasn't prepared for it, and it was... Hello. That's a big hawk that just flew over. But I wasn't prepared for it. I don't remember how I was dressed, but whatever I was wearing at the time, I didn't want to get wet. So I didn't want to wear my shoes in. I just had my normal shoes. It wasn't raining that night at all. I didn't want to get my shoes wet, so I took my shoes off, barefoot. And if I remember correctly, I think I went skinny dipping that night. I don't remember. I think I did because, like I said, I wasn't prepared. I had no plans on swimming that night. I didn't want to get what I was wearing wet. So where I went into the river, it was like a part just under the surface of the water. There's like an area of clay that just kind of gradually slopes down, and then it drops off, and it's really deep there. That's where I went in. And I'm walking along this clay, and all of a sudden my foot slipped out from under me, and I fell, and it hurt. So I didn't realize it at the time, but it was stinging. So I went back to the shore, and I looked at my foot, and what I could see at night. Obviously it was bleeding, so I cut my foot on something. And that part of the river, it was just downstream from the bridge a little bit. So it could have been some kind of garbage. It could have been broken glass. It could have been a piece of steel. It could have been a sharp rock. It could have been a clamshell, right? At that point, it could be anything. So I cut my foot on something, and I went straight up to the hospital. I was like not far from the hospital at that point. I went up and they cleaned it out. I didn't get stitches, but they bandaged it up pretty good. And I rode home, never thought about it again. So everything's going good. Time went by, and I'm not sure how to put it. Everything was normal except for when I was working. I had my work boots on, and at some point during the night, I started getting this pain in the arch of my foot, like right in here. And it really started hurting. I couldn't figure out what it was. So, I kind of forget about it, and then it would happen again. So one day, I my finger feeling it, and there's a lump there. And I'm thinking, well, that's not good. What the heck is that, right? At this lump on the arch of my foot. And obviously that's causing an issue because when I'm working, I don't notice it with my shoes on. I only with my work boots on. So I'd go through the night, the farther through the night I got, the worse this was hurting. So I got to the point where this lump's getting pretty big. I better get it checked out. So I went up to the hospital, and they did an ultrasound on it, and she's looking at it, and she's not sure what she's looking at, but there's this tiny little white speck, just a little white dot on the screen. And she says, it almost looks like a grain of sand. And as soon as she said that, I immediately knew what it was. I said, yeah, it's exactly what it'll be. It'll be a grain of sand from when I cut my foot in the river. So when the hospital cleaned it out, they missed a single grain of sand. So now I'm growing a pearl in my foot. Now what's happening is as this scar tissue is getting bigger, it's latching onto a tendon. So, and I tested that when I moved my big toe back and forth, I could feel that lump moving with it. That's what was causing the pain. This massive scar tissue is becoming part of the tendon, and as I move that tendon, it's moving this mass and it's causing pain. So, okay, gotta have surgery on my foot to get that removed. So, the doctor that looked at it, he wasn't, I don't remember how he put it, he's something like he's not confident enough for himself because it's so close to the tendon. He didn't want to damage the tendon, so he wasn't confident in himself to have the ability to do that, so he referred me to a specialist. And surgery was scheduled for December, I think 19th of that year. That was 2005. So, okay, no problem. I was getting closer to that point, and I'm dealing with the pain, and Christmas comes around. Okay, I had surgery. I may not get ahead of myself here. I had my surgery. I had a month off of work. So I had from like mid-December to mid-January, something like that. So I had the surgery. Foot was all bandaged up. I had stitches and everything, and I was on crutches. Christmas comes along. I go down to visit my parents, and I came home, and my cat was having an issue. I was down to one cat. I had two. The female cat ended up getting breast cancer. I had it removed, and I was still paying for that when she got it again. So I didn't have a choice. I had to put her down. I couldn't afford it anymore. And I don't remember at what point that was. Whether that was before I had my lumen or not, I don't remember. But I know I was living in a trailer at that time. So I was there for 3.5 years, so somewhere in that time period. 2001 to 2003 to 2006, somewhere in that area. But I had her put down, so I was down to one. Nikita, my original cat, my angel, the one that saved me from suicide when I was living in Brantford, showed up one day and became part of my life. So I had him for 11 years, and he always had issues. He had kidney issues. He'd be fine for a long time, and then like for a week straight he'd be puking up, all the toxins building up in his body, and he'd be puking up. And he'd be good for another month or two, and then he'd do it again. So medication was really expensive, so I couldn't do anything for him. But that's all it was, just puking. Other than that, it wasn't really affecting him that much. So I come back after visiting my parents, and he's having an issue. He's meowing. He's trying to use the litter box, but he can't. He squats to pee, but he won't pee. And as he gives up on it, and as he's walking, he's dripping all over the place. And I'm thinking, well, that's not good. So I took him to the vet, or I called the vet first, and they asked, is he leaving trails? I said yes, and they said, you need to bring him in here right away. So they examined him, and they squeezed his belly, forced him to pee, and they took a sample of his urine, and he's got crystals in his urine. So it's painful for him to pee, so that's why he's not. So basically what they did was they gave me a prescription cat food, and what it does is it makes them thirsty so that they drink more. And the more they drink, the more they wash out their system, and that prevents the crystals from forming. So, okay. So also about this time, I got tired of living in the trailer. I was having issues with a few things. It started with all those tornado threats. I'm in this little 17-foot travel trailer on the edge of a field, and every storm that came along, I got wondering, is this the one that's going to blow me across the field? So I developed a fear of the wind, which I still have today because of that. I got to the point where I had straps over the trailer, and I had them screwed into the ground with those I'm not sure what they call them. They're like a giant corkscrew. You screw them into the ground and you attach the dog leash to them. I had a bunch of those holding the trailer down. That's how paranoid I was getting. And It got to be too much for me. And the other issue I was having was when you heat your home, if you're using natural gas or electricity, you pay for what you used, every month or every 2 months, however it is you get billed. When you're running on propane, you have to have that ahead of time. So the trailer had normal, like, barbecue cylinders. I bought the bigger ones, the 60 pounders. They were like $35 to $37, or 35 to 37 cents a liter to fill at that time. And like I said, single person on doing a minimum wage job, I don't have a lot of money to play with. And in wintertime, like, we were getting frigid winters. Like that picture I showed you with the frost, I've mentioned before that mid-January to mid-February is our coldest period of the year. And at that time, we're getting, minus 20, minus 30 degrees Celsius temperatures. And at that temperature, I'd go through a tank in like 2 days. It was insane. But the trailer wasn't insulated all that well. At that temperature, up the top bunk where I'd sleep, it's like 30 degrees up there, and it's like minus 20 on the floor. The cat's water dish is frozen solid. There's quite a difference there. It was a good heater. It was a really nice heater, but the floor, there was nothing heating the floor at all. It was nasty. So, problems I was having was I'd go to bed and I'd wake up, I'm out of propane. So I'd crawl out from under this nice warm blanket into the cold, put cold clothes on, go outside into the cold, change the frozen tank, and come back in, and with frozen fingers trying to hold that button down to get my furnace to relight. And I'll tell you, that thing did not like to light when it was cold. Did not like to stay going. And pushing that thing down, it's got a really, really strong spring on it. And with frozen fingers now, it was not a pleasant experience. And I just got to the point where I just didn't want to do it anymore. So another person I was working with at Walmart, he was a newer person. He wasn't there from the beginning like everyone else. Like the store just opened in 2001. And I started working there before the store was even finished being constructed. So I remember the day I was hired was 9/11, that very day. That's how I remember when I was hired. That's the day I was hired. And we went out, the floor was tiled. That was about it. The parking lot hadn't been paved yet. There were no windows in it. And we were already starting to set the shelves up in the back and that. That was pretty interesting. So at this point, a lot of us originals were still there. But this new guy, he was new. He was just starting. He was working night shift as well. And he offered me his basement, to live in his basement. So I didn't think a whole lot of it. I didn't know anything about him. Didn't know much about him. But it was a chance to get out of the trailer. So, okay. So, I was gonna move in New Year's Day. Then at this same period of time, my cat was having issues. I just had surgery on my foot. I was off work for a month because of it, so I had all this time, but everything was happening at once. And I'll tell you, I had a toboggan that I was dragging behind me. I had the rope around my waist, walking on crutches across this field, dragging everything out to my car, right? It was not fun. So I moved into his place. Finally got out of the trailer. And then I got sick. I got the worst flu I had ever got in my entire life. It was absolutely horrible. I'd never experienced anything like it. And it lasted for at least a week. It was just horrible. Finally got over that. And not long after that, my cat's kidneys failed. That's still hard to talk about. And that floored me because there was nothing I could do for him. There is medication I could have gave him, but it was more than my paycheck. There's no way I could afford it. So I had to make that really, really tough decision. I had to have him put down. And that was... I've had to do that with a lot of cats, but none of them bothered me like this one. This cat, he was special. He was my angel. And he was my best friend for 11 years. And that was the hardest thing I ever had to do.